Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Now in today's video, I pulled out my sequins finally and unpacked them, and I'm going to be showing a couple different tips on how to make some image shaker cards. These are so fun and interactive, and I cannot wait to share how to make it easy to cut out your images in today's video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I'm going to start off with the Puddle Pals stamp set, and I love this one because it's got a couple different images like the umbrella and the puddle to make the shaker cards, and there's some really great encouraging sentiments in here as well. So I'm going to get started by taking some of the larger images that I want to stamp out and stamping them using some jetpack archival ink. I'm doing this inside of my Misty stamping tool just in case if it doesn't stamp perfectly, and you'll see here that it doesn't, so it really helps to kind of stamp it in here so I can do it twice or 3 times if I need to make it nice and solid. And I'm using the Debbie stamping tool. That is the thing that I'm kind of pressing down. I know a lot of people use these kind of pressurized tools, which has been really helping me lately to get just the amount of pressure that I need to get it stamped perfectly. So you can see here I'll go in with that and it stamps really nicely after I give it the pressure there. Now with the girl and the puddle, I'll actually be cutting out the shaker right from that piece. So I'm just lining this up exactly where I want it on the card. Here I lined up the puddle kind of towards the bottom, and then I'll stamp that down as well. And like I said, those I'm cutting straight out of the cardstock, and that will be the card base. So I wanted to make sure those were lined up perfectly because I'm not cutting them out afterwards. So once I have stamped those images down, I'm then going to bring in my craft sheet here, and I ended up just taking a craft knife and kind of cutting the center of whatever image I wanted cut out. So for here, I went in with the umbrella image and I'm cutting that out, and I just wanted to cut out the inside of that image and leave the black border around the line. So I ended up going in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors, and once you make the hole, you can go through and start fussy cutting them out. I love these scissors because they're nice and small so they can get into all those details. And then also a really great tip is to put your scissors in from the bottom so I have the handle underneath the cardstock rather than going in from above the cardstock. I find that it actually doesn't destroy the cardstock as much, and it's a lot easier to get into all the little details without bending the cardstock too much. So I found that was a really super helpful tip as I was doing this. I tried it out before this by going above the cardstock with the handle, and it just kind of destroys the cardstock, and we want to keep it as clean as possible. So once I've gotten all those details cut out, I can then go in with my bone folder. This is totally optional, but again, some pieces get bent up a little bit, and so this just kind of helps score it and fold it back down to make sure everything is nice and smooth. So once that's all complete, I'm going to go in onto my craft sheet here, and I'm going to bring in a couple different colors of my Simon Hurley Create ink and just smoosh it on the surface to create a nice wide array of colors and a palette to use for watercoloring. So then I'm going to go in with a paintbrush and a little bit of water and start my watercolor process. Now whenever I'm watercoloring, I like to add my water down onto the surface first, just a little layer of water, then I'll go in with my color. This makes it so that it doesn't sink into the surface right away, and it has a little bit more movement and playtime on the surface of the cardstock. Now for a skin tone, I'll take a little bit of Over the Moon, which is a little bit of yellow, mixed with a little bit of Gur, which is brown, and you can mix it however much you want to make the skin tone darker or lighter, but I find that that's a really great combination to make it a little bit warmer, but create whatever color you want. Now for my jacket here, I did the same exact thing. I usually start off with a layer of water, just a light layer of water. You don't need too much to where the color is kind of moving and mixing, but it just makes the surface ready to take the color. And then I'll end up going in with a second color, whether it is the same color but with less water or a darker tone. And then I can go in and add a little bit of depth and dimension onto the surface. While the first layer is still wet, this really helps to kind of blend things together, but add a little bit of depth and dimension to the image to make it kind of come to life a little bit more. I don't really have any where specifically where to put the darker color. I usually do it wherever things meet or where I think that there should be a little bit of a shadow, like behind his head or where anything is meeting each other. Now for the hair, I'll do the exact same thing, going with a little bit of water and color, and then to make it add a little bit of shading, I'll go in with less water and add more of the color down onto the surface. Now I did the same thing with this girl here with the umbrella. I just went in with her coat and added a little bit of water down and then started my color. You can see actually here, I started off with the color without any water because I kind of forgot about it. And you can see how dark that sleeve got. And because it just sunk right into the cardstock right away and didn't have any time to move around. So that's why it's super important. After that, I added the water down and started my blending again because it helps just make a nice soft wash of color before you go in with the shading the second time. Now here I went with a little bit of Prom Queen to add the shading. You can see that one is nice and dark and will give lots of saturation. And I just add it here and there to give a little bit of touches of depth and dimension all over the jacket and different areas. So I'm just adding that in, and then again, if you need to blend it out with the other color, just take a little bit of extra water and go right in between those to blend it out. But I find that not adding too much water is really helpful because you don't want things to kind of bleed too much on the surface of your cardstock. So once I'm done with that, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of a grounding place for this girl. So I went in with one of my newer colors, Breakup Blue, and watered it down a little bit to create a little puddle that she's standing in the rain there. And then I decided to go in with a little bit less water and add a little bit more depth and dimension towards her as she's standing in that puddle. This will just give her a little bit of a grounding place to stand. I kind of felt like she was a little bit in mid-air otherwise without this. So doing it and creating kind of a scene is really helpful to kind of bring the whole card together, especially with a rainy day scene like this. So once I'm done watercoloring that out, I decided to stamp the top part of the image again with the umbrella because this is the part where the shaker is going to be. And because we cut the other umbrella out, I still wanted all the line detail and all the color to be in the image behind it. So I'm going to go in here and just start watercoloring this in with a couple different rainbow colors from my Simon Hurley Create line again. And once again, I'll go in with a little bit of water first, blend out that color with a lighter version, and then with less water, I'll go back in and add a little bit of shading in there as well. Now, of course, you could totally skip this step of coloring the umbrella in and stamping it down and just add like a piece of pattern paper behind it or something. You won't have all the detail in there, but you could totally do that as well if you didn't want to re-stamp the image for the shaker card. But I thought that this would be kind of helpful to share how to line this back up with the image. So then I'm going to go in with a piece of acetate. This I think is just a piece of like stamp packaging, and I'm just going to cut it down to size to fit over that window of the umbrella. Once I've done that, I'm going to add it down using just a little bit of tape runner behind the image. I just added lots right around the image, and then I'll add down my acetate sheet right behind it. Now I also wanted to remove any bit of static that it had from this, so I ended up going with my anti-static powder tool and removed any static from the surface there. I find that that's super helpful to do when you're making a shaker card. Now for my foam tape, you could totally do one layer of foam tape, depending on how many sequins you add. I didn't add many today, so one layer probably would suffice. But if you want to add lots of sequins, go in with your foam tape, and I'm just going to fold it back onto itself to double the layer of foam tape. Now whenever I make a shaker, I also like to cut this in half. For this I use my larger Tim Holtz scissors. These are the bigger shears. They're non-stick and they're really easy to cut through that stuff with. But then when I go in with my foam tape, it's a lot more easy to kind of move around and make a tunnel. So I like to kind of cut it in half. It saves some foam tape as well. So I'll just go around the surface of that umbrella, pretty much right up to the edge, not too close though, because you don't want to see it from the side of the card. And I'm just going to create a channel for my sequins to sit in. You want to make sure that if you're switching like pieces of foam tape as well, that you butt it right next to each other so that there aren't any gaps and there's no way any sequins can get out. Now to add my sequins in here, I'm using a bunch of little tiny clear sequins, I think from Pretty Pink Posh. And you just want to move them onto the surface of the umbrella or whatever you're going to place them on, and just make sure they're all going to be inside of that foam tape. And then I'll line it up over top and press all the foam tape down really nicely to make sure that everything is nice and adhered before I start shaking it around. So once that's pressed down, you can then start moving it and shaking it, and all those fun little sequins can move around inside of there and create a fun little shaker card. Now for the card base, I decided to go in with a little bit of the new color Breakup Blue and a blending brush because I wanted to create a kind of matching color cardstock to the puddle. So this will just kind of help to match that color, and it also helps to kind of save a little bit of money. I don't have a ton of colored cardstocks in my craft room, so this can kind of help me if I want to match it specifically to a project. I just take a piece of white cardstock and blend my color on. Now for the card, the back of the shaker card, I ended up going in with a doubled up foam tape for the rest of it to match the dimension that we had from the shaker card panel. It does use quite a bit of foam tape, but I find that it's worth it for that fun interactive portion. And I'll just add all that down and then add it down onto my card base there. Now, once that's done, I felt like it was a little bit plain still, so I decided to go in with my Looks Like Rain stencil, and I just went in with any leftover ink that was my Breakup blue color on there, and using my blending brush to just kind of blend around this. Now, I just added the rain kind of around the umbrella because it wouldn't be underneath where the girl is standing, and that just added a little bit of extra detail there, which I really liked. I love that encouraging sentiment that says, "I'm here for you, rain or shine." And that shaker card is so much fun that we were able to cut the image out of that umbrella and make that portion of the card be the fun and interactive shaker. So for the next card, I'm going to go in with my Breakup blue color again, and I'm just going to go in and blend this out on the surface. I've kind of created some marks where my puddle would be, and I want to blend the background around that to create something that's going to go behind the sequins as you're shaking it. Now, once I'm done blending that out, I actually went in with a little bit of water as well because I wanted to add a little bit of texture to the puddle, and my inks react really nicely with that water. So now I'll kind of test things out, how everything's looking here. And now again, to create a little bit of a scene or a background or a grounding place for today's card, I decided to again go in with the Looks Like Rain stencil and my Breakup blue color and do a little bit of blending over the background above the puddle where the image is going to sit. Now for this first one, I went in with a little bit of darker color there by laying it up a little bit. And then I'm going to go in and shift the stencil just a little bit so that some of the raindrops go in between the other ones. And without adding any more ink, I'm just going to go in with a light wash of the same exact color, and it'll just add a little bit of depth and dimension by shifting that stencil. So a little bit more interest there. Now I'm going to again take a little bit of stamp packaging, a little bit of acetate there, and cut it down so that it fits right the shape of that puddle there. And then again, I'll add a little bit of tape runner adhesive onto the back of the Puddle cardstock, and just all around, kind of really close to that puddle you want it to be. And then I'll add the acetate sheet down, and again use my powder tool to get rid of any static on the surface there. That's just so that sequins won't stick to it. Then I'll go in with my doubled up foam tape again, just by folding the foam tape over onto itself, and I'll create a little channel here. Here I just went in with a couple different pieces of it. It doesn't need to be one continuous strip. Just make sure you bud them right up next to each other, and then just kind of create a little channel where the sequins can shake around. And honestly, you can make it as big or as little as you want, however close to the image you want it to be, and depending on how many sequins you want inside of it. Then I'm going to dump in my sequin mix here, and this just has a bunch of clear and blue sequins that are nice and flat, but just a bunch of different blue ones. And then I'll kind of bundle those up in the center so that the foam tape doesn't touch any of them. And then I'll line it up and press it all down, and again, give it good pressure before you start moving and shaking it. And then I'm going to add the guy up there jumping in that puddle. I think it's so much fun to have that puddle be the shaker card and that fun element there. Now I'm going to kind of test out different sentiments, and I ended up liking the "When Life Gives You a Rainy Day" play in the puddle sentiment. I think that one is just so fun and encouraging to anybody who might be struggling. Then I'm going to stamp that down in some jetpack archival ink and clear heat emboss it by throwing over a layer of heat embossing powder and heating it until it's nice and clear and shiny. And then I'm going to cut that out. Now, whenever I'm doing a sentiment and I'm kind of layering it up on the card, I like to just cut right around it using the Fiskars Spring Assist scissors, and I just leave a little bit of a white border, so this will take up a little bit of less space than just a regular rectangle would because I layered it up over top of the image there. So I love how this card turned out, this fun puddle scene, and I love that we were able to turn the puddle into the shaker card. It just makes this totally interactive and such a fun way to add dimension. Alright guys, I hope you really enjoyed that video. Leave me a comment down below which of the two cards were your favorite, and give this video a big thumbs up, and click that subscribe button down below if you enjoyed this video and don't want to miss any more like this one from me. Alright guys, I'll see you very soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye!